Welcome back, Love Nation. This is Nina. Make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe. Thank you to everybody that has been coming to my channel. Like this video, share this video, and hit that notification bell so you guys know when I drop my next one. We are now in Chapter 10 of reading the amended Diddy lawsuit, which includes a lot of celebrities now by name. And again, this is Chapter 10. If you have not read the previous chapters with me, please make sure you subscribe and go back and watch those. And here we go with part 10. Defendants' batteries on plaintiffs cause physical injury and severe mental and emotional distress, pain and suffering, mental anguish, and loss of enjoyment of life. Defendants' unlawful actions were intentional, done with malice, and or showed a deliberate, willful, wanton, and reckless indifference to plaintiffs' rights. Plaintiffs claim compensatory and punitive damages herein. The amount of damages sought herein exceeds the jurisdictional limits of all other courts, which would otherwise have jurisdiction. Next chapter, seventh cause of action, assault. Plaintiffs against all defendants. Plaintiffs incorporates by reference and realleges each of the preceding paragraphs and all paragraphs below, as though fully set forth and brought in cause of action. Defendants intentionally attempted, threatened, and committed harmful and offensive contacts against plaintiffs, including but not limited to inflicting SA, both physical and emotional, against plaintiffs. Defendants' conduct placed plaintiffs in reasonable apprehension of bodily harm. Defendants' SA on plaintiffs caused physical injury, severe mental and emotional distress, pain and suffering, mental anguish, and loss of enjoyment of life. Defendants' unlawful actions were intentional, done with malice, and or showed a deliberate, willful, wanton, reckless indifference to plaintiffs' rights. Plaintiffs' claims compensatory and punitive damages herein. The amount of damages sought herein exceeds the jurisdictional limits of all other courts which would otherwise have jurisdiction. Next section, eighth cause of action, negligence. Plaintiffs Ashley P. against defendant Shane. Plaintiffs incorporate by reference and reallege each of the proceedings in all paragraphs below, as though fully set forth and brought in this case of action. Defendant Shane invited plaintiff to his home as a guest. Defendant Shane owed plaintiff a right to expect protection from the other defendants, specifically defendant Diddy, while a guest was in his home. As a direct and proximate result of the foregoing negligence, plaintiff was SA'd by defendants Diddy, Shane, and the John Does 1 and 2, causing plaintiffs bodily injury, pain and suffering, mental anguish, and loss of capacity for the enjoyment of life. The losses are either permanent or continuing, and plaintiff will suffer losses in the future. Next section, ninth cause of action, negligent failure to warn. Plaintiffs against defendant Shane, KK, Pelletier, Gonzalez, Valdez, Odell, Druski, Jaguar, Helena, Brandy, and the John Does. Plaintiffs incorporate by reference and reallege each of the proceedings in all paragraphs below as though fully set forth and brought in this case of action. Defendant's conduct created a risk of physical or emotional harm to plaintiffs. Defendants knew and had reason to know that plaintiffs Ashley P. and John Doe were at risk of SA and other offenses by defendant Diddy. Despite the knowledge of the danger and the participation in what happened, defendants did not alert plaintiffs to the risk of SA, harassment, being kept against their will, physical assault, R-wording, and or other attacks by Diddy. In fact, defendants facilitated and assisted defendant Diddy in his illegal, deviant activities and despicable behavior. Defendant Pelletier represented he was lawfully transporting Plaintiff Doe's for the purpose of outstanding warrants. Defendant Shane specifically represented to plaintiffs that she would be safe while a guest in his home and would be free of risk of said attacks. Defendant had reason to know that plaintiffs would be unaware of the risk of SA, harassment, being held against their will, and other crimes by Diddy and other defendants. A warning to plaintiffs by any defendant that they were at risk of what happened by Diddy and other defendants would have reduced the risk of harm to plaintiffs. As a legal and direct result of the aforementioned conduct and omission of defendants, plaintiffs were SA'd, harassed, held against their will, etc., and deprived of dignity and personal safety. The depraved attacks on plaintiff caused plaintiff to suffer serious psychological and physical harm from which she may never fully recover. As a direct and legal result of defendant's failure to warn, plaintiff suffered damages, both economic and general non-economic damages, according to proof. Next section, 10th cause of action, negligent supervision and retention, plaintiffs against defendant Diddy. Plaintiffs incorporated by reference and reallege each of the preceding paragraphs and all paragraphs below as though fully set forth and brought in cause of action. At all times material, defendants were employed by defendant Diddy under the control and authority of defendant Diddy. Defendants were unfit or incompetent and pose a particular risk of the actions that happened. Defendant Diddy knew or should have known not only that defendants were unfit and incompetent and pose a particular risk of said actions that happened, but also that this unfitness create a particular risk to plaintiffs. Defendants' unfitness and particular risk to plaintiffs harm plaintiffs. Defendant Diddy knew or should have known that defendants Odell and Druski had previously engaged and was continuing to engage in unlawful acts against people for their own personal gratification. Defendant Diddy knew or should have known that it was foreseeable that defendant Odell and Druski were engaging or would engage in illicit activities with plaintiff under the cloak of authority, confidence, and trust bestowed upon him through defendant Diddy. At no time during the alleged period did Diddy have in place a reasonable system or procedure to investigate, supervise, and monitor said defendants Odell and Druski to prevent the SA that happened, nor did he implement a system of procedure to oversee or monitor conduct toward individuals they encountered. Diddy conspired to and did breach his duties of care owed to plaintiff, including by turning a blind eye and encouraging known abusers by defendants Odell and Druski and the known dangerous conditions of Diddy's enterprise, and by continuing to expose individuals like plaintiff Ashley P. and John Doe to these dangers for decades. Even though Diddy knew or should have known of said illicit acts by himself and defendants Odell and Druski, he failed to use reasonable care in supervising Odell and Druski and did nothing to reasonably investigate, supervise, or monitor said defendants to ensure the safety of individuals they encountered. Diddy's negligence in supervising and or retaining defendants Odell and Druski was a substantial factor in causing harm to plaintiff. As a result of the above described conduct, plaintiff has expended significant costs on therapy and suffered damages including deprivation of income and benefits, loss of employment opportunities, severe physical and emotional distress, pain and suffering, mental anguish, humiliation, loss of enjoyment of life, and damage to her reputation and career. Plaintiffs claim compensatory and punitive damages herein. The amount of damages sought herein exceeds the jurisdictional limit of all other courts which would otherwise have jurisdiction. Next section, 11th cause of action, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Plaintiffs against all defendants. Plaintiffs incorporate by reference and reallege each of the proceedings, paragraphs and all paragraphs below as though fully set, and brought in cause of action. Defendants conspired to and did engage in conduct that was extreme and outrageous and intentionally caused severe emotional distress to plaintiffs. Defendants' conduct exceeded all possible bounds of decency. Defendants acted with the intent and knowledge that plaintiffs suffered emotional distress due to their inexcusable and outrageous conduct. Defendants' conduct caused plaintiff to suffer severe physical and emotional, mental distress, pain and suffering, mental anguish, and loss of enjoyment of life. Defendants' unlawful actions were intentional, done with malice, and or showed a deliberate, willful, and wanton reckless indifference to plaintiffs' rights. Plaintiffs claim compensatory and punitive damages herein. The amount of damages sought herein exceeds the jurisdictional limits of all other courts which would otherwise have jurisdiction. I will end chapter 10 of reading right here. We will continue with chapter 11 very, very shortly. Please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to this video. Share your comments respectively below. And until next time, like, share, subscribe, and enjoy your day. Bye, guys.